Hi, it's Jim. If you're expecting our Project Synapse show, we did that post yesterday, but it turns out we have a surplus of great content, and I'm experimenting with at least occasionally having two interviews on the weekend. This one is also AI related. It's an interview with the head of Zoho's Canadian operations. If you get us on any major podcast platform, you can still back up to Project Synapse from yesterday. Or if you're getting this on a Google or Alexa smart speakers, I don't think you can roll back, but you can still find the full Project Synapse on our website at technewsday.com. That's technewsday.com. Just look for podcasts. The full episode is there. Have a great Sunday. I'll be back Monday morning with the tech news. My guest today is Chandrashekar LSP, which is a shortening of his name. And at one point, I always included his full last name until I realized that LSP was a little bit like being the Fonz. Everybody calls him that. All his friends do. And I like to class myself as one of his friends. And I think hopefully at the end of the interview, so will you. But he's the head of Zoho's Canadian operation and a proud resident of Cornwall, Ontario, where Zoho has its Canadian headquarters. Now, I always say listening to this podcast is a lot like coming to a party at someone's house. I hope it's like that. I know everybody, but you don't know everybody. So let's get a little bit of an introduction. LSP, welcome, first of all. But can you give us a little bit of an introduction to you and your role at Zoho?
Sure, Jim, and thank you for having me on the show once again. It's been a while, but great to connect with you. And yes, I count you as friend, and you can count me as friend too. So you can call me LSP. Like most people here in Zoho, I've spent quite a bit of time being associated with them for a bit over 23 years now. Jim, that's where I am at. Yet to touch the silver jubilee mark, but hopefully we'll do. And as far as my current role and I was concerned, like you said, yes, I manage Zoho Canada. The focus is to grow the region. The focus is to understand the nitty gritties of engaging more meaningfully with businesses in Canada, understanding the needs of the business, and then helping them in their digitization process. That's what I'm here for.
Yep. And from central headquarters in Cornwall, you're planning a road trip?
Yes, a road trip is on my mind for sure. And in general, we also do a lot of these. Something that I'm planning later this year is something that we call Discover Zoho, which is actually a road show that we do where we go to specific cities and then bring our prospects and customers together so that they can get more value out of Zoho. This is an event that we have started doing in other regions. This is something that I've planned to do here in Canada as well. Roadshow it will be, but we call it Discover Zoho.
Yeah. And again, I don't get any payment from Zoho. We're just friends. But the Zoho events are kind of different. They're very relaxed. You get a whole opportunity to have great conversations with people, and the food's pretty good too,
Yeah,
actually.
thank you. We take extra care on the food part, James,
Well,
just so you know.
especially when I'm coming. Yeah. Back to our topic, and I wanted to talk to this, and the reason why I got this thing across my desk, which is why I got a hold of your people and said we got to chat. Zoho has developed its own AI, if I've got this correctly. That's that, and it's called Zia. So first of all, I want to know where the name came from because I'm always critical. AI companies name their stuff like GPT. Doesn't that roll off the tongue? Or even, and sorry, Anthropic Claude. Now I pronounce it Claude because I'm Canadian. Makes it feel a little bit
Yeah.
better. But Zia sounds like some sort of mythical god, or at least part of the Marvel universe. Where does the name come from?
As fascinating as that was, ZIA stands for Zoho's Intelligent Assistant.
Oh,
Plain and
wow.
simple.
I'm crushed now. Nobody, it's such a great name. So Zia is your own AI and a large language model. And from the stuff I've been reading, you offer three levels of it. You get roughly a 1 billion parameter model, a 2.6 and a 7 billion. So small, medium, and large. You can do the Goldilocks thing. But this is actually quite important because as most people know, there's been a big move to using the right sized LLM for the right job. And do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
100%. It's a very important conversation to be had, Jim, especially in the light of what we are seeing with these hyperscalers trying to go after acquiring nuclear power plants to feed their data centers to be able to run all these massive models, right? AI has come in, especially the generative AI piece is game changing in a lot of ways. But then here at a point where Zoho is at, we're taking a pause. We've been doing AI for more than a decade now, where we have been using machine learning models to do prediction, to forecasting, and all those things in business context. Now, when it comes to large language models, what's happening is everybody has essentially become a value added reseller of these hyperscalers, such as your OpenAI, your Meta, and so on and so forth. All these LLMs, and including Google's and so on. And what's happened there, if you look at the hyperscalers, is a consumer LLM is being shoved down the throats of businesses saying, okay, this is going to solve your business use case. And that is not quite the truth. And that is shoehorning a solution when you have to go back to the basics and understand that the way enterprise approaches problems, the way enterprise wants to solve problems, is not necessarily the same way as how a consumer application would do it. It needs a lot more. And when I say a lot more, it doesn't mean they just need they have tons of money to throw at the problem. The point that one has to recognize is you have to make AI affordable for enterprises to thrive. Be it a small business, a medium business, a large business. Those with large pockets, they do their own LLMs, they customize it. But then when you look at the industry in general, take for instance, country like Canada, 96% of businesses are small and medium businesses, and they are being forced to pay what we call the AI tax just because somebody has created a shiny new object, a feature that's wrapped with an AI functionality that's built on a third party LLM. What happens is these value added resellers, essentially the software providers today, are using other LLMs to create these solutions. And then these solutions don't come in at a very affordable price point because they have to mark up, they have to add their feed and pay the LLM providers and so on. So what's happening is you have models that are massive for small business use cases. The question is why? Now we at Zoho went back to the drawing board and said, we have been doing AI for so long. Yes, generative AI is fascinating, but we have to have a method to this madness. We just can't be wrappers and reselling other LLMs. We went back to the basics. We created our own LLM with 1 billion, 2 billion, and 7 billion parameters. And then these are very contextual. They are based on the data that's within the enterprise business applications. Because today, a general purpose LLM, the challenge is it's just inhale just about everything from the whole world, right, from the internet, and then it can basically give you some output. But then, how contextual is it to your business? Have you been able to feed it your business transactional data that are stored in your customer support system, in your sales system, in your marketing system? And is it able to bring all of these together contextually to help you in the same thing, such as creating, let's say, an email for an aggrieved customer? Today, you go to ChatGPT to do it, but then what if you have very specific information about this customer's journey from the time they came in to the time that they have an escalation? If you look at this holistically and say, hey, help me to generate an email that can calm or alleviate their concerns, just imagine the value that this can unpack. Do you really need a 32 billion or a much larger model for that? The answer to that question in our assessment is no. You basically have the structured information. You can make use of this and still use generative AI in a very compelling way that solves specific business problems.
Yeah, and I know in many cases, software developers may make a great feature out of something that they can't do and say, well, you should use this because we can't do this. This is what we've got. But you've got MCP, or a model context protocol. Sorry, you've got that already. So for some time, Zoho's been able to use any one of these large language models, and you seem to have gotten on the ability. And Anthropic developed this, but it's become standard throughout the industry. This model context protocol
Yes,
allows you to communicate with any application and an
that is
AI. So
correct.
you've got that. So
Yeah.
you're not making just to cover up something you can't do. But I think the pieces of this are, and I think this is an important piece for our listeners, is that this idea of the smaller model, the specialist model. You might have heard mixture of experts if you're listening to this, and those sorts of things. And you start to see that these smaller models can do everything you need them to do faster, better, cheaper, if you use them in the right context. And that seems to be the point you're making, if I've got that correctly.
100%. Let me unpack this in the next level. So we talked about right sizing. Now let's look at it from the perspective of what does it mean for a technology company like us. First off, we're building an LLM because we're a technology company. And like I said earlier, we don't just want to be resellers, value added resellers of somebody else's LLM. And especially when you look at it from the lenses of how Zoho approaches every technology with the privacy shades that we have on, Jim, as a company, we have always believed in vertical integration and owning the whole stack. In our previous conversations, I know you and I have talked a lot about privacy, and then how the Zoho's approach is we do not want to be value added resellers of other cloud infrastructure providers, because one fine day they'll wake up and change their terms and conditions and say that I'm no longer not going to do ads and not going to sell your information. I'm going to be doing that. Now, we didn't want to be beholden to those business practices, which we have seen has only become more, it's, it's become perverted in the recent past. And now our stance is we want to create an LLM. This LLM will not learn from our customers. We will use open data. We will source and pay for the information based on which we are training these models. And then when these gets deployed in each customer's situation, it will learn the data, but it is going to be firewalled within their business context. We are not taking that information to feed our own LLMs again. We have a very clear idea and approach about how we are going to deploy AI. And what this allows us also to do, this owning this whole infrastructure piece ourselves and right sizing the models, we are able to give these features and functionalities at no additional cost.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, we are not.
Sorry,
Again, when it comes to a point where it does become something that is significant, that's a different conversation to be had. If we know that, hey, this particular model, this particular outcome that you want will require a usage based billing or something like that, we'll approach that at that point. But our goal is to make all of these capabilities available at the subscription prices that we are now selling our SaaS software. We are not going to mark it up more.
yeah,
As you
and
can
I
see,
think
there is a method. You said there is a very clear idea and approach to this. There is the privacy aspect, there is the technology aspect, there is the aspect of making it affordable to all our existing user base.
And I think the privacy piece of this is important, as is the knowledge base that things learn from. We spend a great deal of time talking about hallucinations.
Mhm.
Hallucinations are in an AI context merely the model following a path to some data that's out there that's irrelevant. They don't make data up. They take data that they have and they find that instead of where they should be focused. And so in many cases, narrowing the focus, and we've talked about that with RAG, with retrieval augmented generation, with trying to get specialized expert models. If you contain the model, you actually increase its accuracy. At least that's my understanding of it.
100%, 100%. And then what's happening in a typical enterprise today is there is a lot of data, and then there is also data that has been cleansed and that is currently being used for certain use cases like business intelligence. Now, if you start feeding this validated, cleansed, and prepared data into AI systems, into a large language model for it to make its assessment and to help you drive some outcomes. Imagine it's adding on. Think of these as Lego blocks. You have data, that's the foundation Lego block. And on top of that, you put business intelligence and you put AI that are contextual. There is AI in the context of business intelligence, things like interacting with the system and saying, show me the sales performance for my sales exec A for the last 3 years. Boom, it's going to come back. Again, it's using AI, it's using the data, it's using the capability of the business intelligence systems to give you a nice looking report or a dashboard about an inquiry that you have to make of your business data. Now take it to your customer support system, where we launched something called Zia Hubs, where imagine uploading all your support calls into a hub, a centralized repository, and then saying, can you find the the feature that has had the most success in the last 6 months, or what has been the number one complaint from our customers in the last quarter? It can pour over the entire log of calls and then say, okay, this particular feature that you launched did not hit the mark, or this particular feature that you launched hit the mark. So your ability to come out with private outcomes based on which you can make decisions. That's the fascinating part. So the LLM piece is foundational. And pretty much like how we approach AI, we do our own data centers, Jim. You know about this,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Now, if I'm an AI company, if I'm saying that I don't build my AI engine, it's like a car company not making its own engine, right?
Yeah.
What's the real point? Now, so you have the LLM, and now the question about interoperability. That's where the MCP server comes into play. So we have launched an MCP server. Now, people who are building agents can interact with Zoho's applications like our CRM and help desk and ticketing system, and they can build their own agentic workflows by means of interacting with our system. So that's one part of it. Now, the other beautiful extension to this MCP piece is we have also launched Zoho Agent Studio, where we have built a lot of agentic capabilities in our own applications. But then what's also happening is our partners, implementation partners who are doing services out there, they are coming up with specific use cases around agentic models. Now they're saying, hey, we want to be able to build these agentic capabilities. Obviously, we can't wait for the train to come to the station. We want to accelerate the roadmap for the business customer who is in real estate, who has a very specific outcome that they want to go after, right? So our partners are now able to build agents using the Agent Studio, thereby accelerating the roadmap for specific verticals or specific use cases that they are after. So clearly, if you look at it, there's a foundation, which is the LLM piece that we have built. We have the interoperability piece that comes in because of the addition of the MCP service to expose our data to the world, and then using that MCP server to build our own agents and having our ecosystem partners build additional agents. So it's all the pieces of Lego blocks coming together and then giving you a very strong foundation to build AI and have outcomes.
Yeah, I want to just go back to this data piece for a second because and this is something that I understand having sat in with your people, and I think it's important. We might think of Zoho as a CRM. It's really become an enterprise system. I mean, you have, I don't know how many systems integrated there, 55 or something like that. So it's really become an enterprise system that has a common database. So first of all, you've got that data, your actual data to work on. Then you've got the ability, if you want to use MCP or to be able to communicate with something else. And now the ability to have agents that are specifically built for your industry or your own particular usage. This is a pretty massive package. I know Zoho is not a small company, but this is a pretty aggressive movement forward in an enterprise system for small to enterprise level companies. Pretty big deal. What's the reaction been from clients?
they're excited. Again, there has been a lot of some of these use cases have been vetted with our customers already, and the the productivity gains. The biggest gain you would see with AI today, Jim, is productivity. But then also, if you think about how this is changing the way we are working, is it's addressing, or AI should. There's a litmus test that I saw the other day that was interesting. If AI is eliminating drudgery, dangerous, and there was one more D out there, that something that is dangerous, drudgery, and I think it was dirty, right? If you can eliminate all, if AI can eliminate this, this is a massive gain. This is if AI is able to address any one of this, then that's a beautiful outcome that AI is enabling in an enterprise. The the way customers are approaching this is, yeah, it's been fascinating. In fact, we also launched ASR models, and then we have been able to get some amazing results out of this in interpreting English, and we also have done it for an Indic language, which is Hindi.
Now, ASR, for the people who are out there, is really a voice understanding, a language understanding type of system, right?
Yeah, asynchronous.
Yeah, I can never remember what it stands for. Asynchronous something, but it's really the ability to interpret language. You've got English and Hindi. You're going to add other languages to that, so you
Yes,
can have a voice activated or voice operated system built in as well.
that is correct, Jim.
Wow. Now, another little piece of just so you've got MCP, you're also developing support for the Linux Foundation's A to A protocol. So this is you're again, I think you're a very aggressive build out to become so open and so integrated across the whole spectrum of applications. I,
I think it's a need of the hour. I think how these models get adopted is going to be a pretty big part of this whole initiative, Jim. So it's necessary. It's That's the way that these get vetted more, and then there are more business outcomes that can be derived out of this. That's what we are very excited to see.
wow. So what's your favorite use case?
My use case was around the customer support one that I talked about, where just imagine there is so many, think of Zoho, so many customer support calls and tickets and so on. I think the ability to understand what are the pain points that our customers are having, that's a fascinating one for me. And then using our business information to craft, let's say, a response or an email or do anything that we typically do with ChatGPT, right? The fact that I'm using the corporation's data and taking a specific customer's information to understand them deeper and to have a more, I would say, intimate engagement with them. I think it's all about driving these customer experiences that is going to be so critical, Jim. To me, anything that is touching the customer, anything that's also touching the employee in terms of how they're able to be more productive, any such use case, I would say I can't stick to one use case, honestly, but then anything that's CX or customer experience related is something that we are very passionate about as a company,
Yeah.
that because that's the tools on the front end side of tools that we make for the customer touch points. Those are massive, and that has been a great one. And then now I have to be making a confession. Being the data guy, anything that we're doing on the business intelligence side, there are beautiful use cases that we have been able to address. Those are some on the data management side, data cleansing, data preparation. We have added some capabilities out there using natural language to clear the data and say, join these two data sets. And the way you're just interacting with the system to get to the outcomes on the data side, it's fascinating. Again, that's a personal thing. Yeah.
I started playing with this 10 years ago when I was working for IT World in the publishing, and we had the database that we had, and I desperately wanted to get insights from it. And that was so my mind goes to the BI analytics, and obviously from my past as a data guy as well. You've got the automation, quote generation and all that stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah,
Saves a lot of time. Wonderful
yeah,
things.
yeah.
I want to play with your deal analyzer or the revenue growth specialist and start to say, what can I learn from this? And I think that's we've made this accessible now for managers of companies that could be even relatively small, that could actually start to say, and you forget about this. If you have 1,000 customer entries that come in, you can miss the forest for the trees. And so being able to ask it questions, that was, I was, if I had more time, I'd be playing more right now.
So, Jim, again, going back to some of these use cases that you're talking about, something that you said that resonated with me right now was making it accessible to everybody, right? That's what I mean. It need not be a massive enterprise, great company to have access to these kind of systems. And that's where Zoho has a deep passion, making these capabilities available to business of any size. We work with the largest companies on the planet that you can think of. We're also working with the company that started yesterday. Our ability to kind of spread and be relevant in each of these different industry types is what we are passionate about, and to make technology accessible. This is actually a mission that I would say that's Zoho's mission, to make technology accessible to all types of businesses. And AI is yet another thing. We started the company in the late 90s, just when internet came. Were shipping software on floppy disks, then CDs, and then streaming, which is now SaaS and so on. It's been a fascinating ride, I would say.
My passion has been that smaller businesses need to get on board with AI. And it's daunting to say, well, I have to get a server, or I have to learn all these, or I have to get all these skills. And companies like yours that are providing what is essentially a model that almost anybody could adopt and work and afford. That's one of the things where I think people need to start playing with this
what people
and
need to also
experimenting.
be and what people need to also be aware of, and that's where the privacy part comes into play, Jim. Abuse of privacy is a norm in this day and age in business, right? And as a small business, how many of them are aware that their information is being used and they are being monetized? And then, even as they operate their business, all of that information is held by somebody else who on a whim can change their decision the next morning. It really takes very few companies with convictions like us are out there. They're saying, we're going to safeguard you. The last thing we want you to think about is your privacy and how your data is being used. And yes, it's the awareness is increasing, but then I don't fault the business owners either, because they want outcomes. They are not going to care about, okay, if somebody wants to sell my data, I don't care as long as I have my cash flow. But there comes a time when you have to know your rights. And that's where I think what the Canadian government is also doing on the privacy side of things is important. They're trying to treat data as a citizen. And I think that's a good stand. And I think countries need it. We need, because even with regulations, you saw recently some big hyperscalers, some really big companies, just this week, they just said no to European Union's recommendations on on responsible usage of data. And they're willing to, for them, it's a business model. They'll pay the penalty. It's just cost of doing business. That's how they're approaching it. But I think philosophically, technology companies need to ask themselves some hard questions on how they're going about doing things.
Yeah. And I think that's something people need to understand in terms of AI in general, and taking off just that whole thing. I'm not I'm not dissing any of these companies, but they remember you. And if you go on to Chat GPT now, you come back on, it says, "Hi Jim." You go to Perplexity, which I love to use. It says, "Hi Jim," and I'll say, "I want this." They say, "Well, is this like what you wanted before?" Now, memory is a good thing, especially we used to talk about this in CRM. The fact that a company can remember you is a great thing. But if they take your memory of the customer, they take all of your knowledge. And that's something I think people need to think about, whether it's ChatGPT or whether it's Meta or anybody else. They're absorbing your customer information and the knowledge of what they do, not so that they can serve you, but so that they can turn it to wherever they want. And this is something big happening in AI, and people need to strategically understand what they're going to do. There are ways to prevent your information going up. I'm not so sure that those really are going to be as applicable in a world where models can learn not from your data, but from the intent of your customers. And that's a pretty big deal.
Let me give you a classic example. Long back, we had a, a discount program. This was years ago with a partner. And this specific promotion was a page that was not supposed to be indexed, and it was not indexed because when you set up the page, you can say not to be crawled, not to be indexed, and so on. And this was essentially shared through promotional emails and promotional brochures and promotional programs that went on at that time. All of a sudden, a customer who recently started evaluating Zoho, he goes to Google and says, "What are some discounts program for Zoho?" Guess what? The page that was not supposed to be crawled from 4 years ago, it came up. Why? Because AI is not just doing indexing, it's just inhaling everything. It's out of context. It puts us in a point where, come on, man, this program even does not even exist. It's a landing page that was on there. And guess what? AI is basically bringing all of those things up, and it's of no consequence. It's of no consequence to the customer because it's a program that may or may not be applicable for them, number one. Number two, from a support point of view, we have to explain ourselves. If you're an existing customer, there's no consequence. All that I'm saying is there is so much information that these LLMs are now having hold over, and they don't have the context.
Yeah, and if you're a big company, you may understand how to deal with this. I mean, but you, as a small company, you have to understand your robots.txt, which is on your website, do you think is going to say, "Oh, Google, stay away from this," and Google will for search. But AIs don't respect that.
Exactly.
They'll dive into anything that
That's the
you
war that's
vaguely
going on.
exposed.
That's the war that's
Yeah.
going on, right? We see it down there with OpenAI and all of these court cases and everything that's going on. It's all about they want unbridled rights over everything. I actually spoke to a very small business owner, Jim. I just want to bring this up. It's an interesting conversation. They were in the technology business, a very small company doing some very specific telco oriented service, a niche company, and they had their website. And the owner spoke to me, said he has shut down his website because all of a sudden his hosting cost has gone up because all of these AI systems are plundering information. And he says, in some cases, because I'm a niche vendor, I had to put information that are very specific and that have some IPs. At least there is you can allude to some IPs. It's not very specific in the sense it's not very plain, but you can allude to some IPs being tied to some of those solutions that he was building. Now AI systems are bombarding his website, getting the information, and then they can connect some dots. Maybe it's 30% or 40% of what his IP is, but still he said, I shut down my website because all these AI systems
Yeah.
are, number one, taking my IP information. Number two, my hosting cost has gone up, has skyrocketed.
There have been some cases where people have looked at their server overload and went, "What's happening?" And the fact is, they're being scanned by so many of these AI companies now that their bills are going out of the moon, so to speak. So it is an interesting world that we live in. And I think, and what I wanted to bring this back to, and why I was excited to have this conversation was, and I know Zoho deals with enterprise, and I know you've got lots of larger companies, and that's a good thing. But right now in Canada, we need to become more competitive. There's just there, and we're struggling against all kinds of forces from all around the world, and we're going to have to step up as a nation and become more intelligent at AI. So any opportunity you can have to learn or develop that, regardless of the size of a business, and the size of a business doesn't matter anymore. You can be a one-person business and be $10 million in sales in this world if you have the right product mix and the right things going on. So it's not number of people is no longer the importance of your business. But it's a question of how do you get into that and how do you develop that. That's the thing I'd like my listeners to be thinking about.
Yeah, agreed. It's there's so many directions this can take. When you even just looking at AI, or let's say more broadly, technology hypes, the internet changed the way people consume things. Information became more accessible, knowledge was more accessible, and things like distribution. Think of, let's say, the way software is being delivered today. We are no longer shipping CDs and DVDs and stuff, it's streaming. Think of music. Gone are the days of records and cassettes and CDs. It's now all streaming. Same thing with video. But the AI technology implication is fascinating, and this is something that we had a presentation internally by our chief evangelist. His point was AI is changing creation, while distribution did not disrupt the amount of time it took to create a song or a movie. Today, AI is disrupting creation. It's fascinating to think about it because all along technology made things more accessible. In that sense, distribution was optimized, and it is as simple as it is today when compared to, let's say, late 90s. Now, with this fascinating distribution model that is super efficient and highly optimized, you're coming up with this layer of technology that's going to make creation or disrupt creation. And literally every second week, we are waking up to something that's fascinating that's happening, Jim. So there is opportunity not just beyond boundaries, beyond borders. I think there's a lot that can happen. And another interesting way to think of this is also if you think of AI as the brain, robotics is the body. There are some interesting technological evolutions that we can see. I think it's going to be fascinating. Again, we can sit and talk until the cows come home, but where this can go, man, your mind races into 500 different directions. Think of businesses, think of supply chain, think of medicine, think of, oh man, it's unbelievable what can happen.
The potential for entrepreneurs and for businesses is incredible. Some people may know this. I'm also a science fiction author, and I've got a book out there. And I got into a debate with one of Canada's great science fiction authors, Robert Sawyer. His position was, as a creator, this was something we had to at least fight about. And in my position was, you're not going to stop it. This is unstoppable, and the only question you can have is, how do I craft it, work with it, or adapt to it? And I don't think of that as a defeatist position. I think there's all kinds of things that we can have where our human creativity comes to bear, but we're going to have to understand this is not going to stop because we want to say, oh, hold on, I'm not ready.
It's evolution, right, Jim? I think it's just purely evolution. If we can go back to the the invention of the wheel, what would the people who were doing the heavy lifting would have thought about all these things? And they had to evolve, and then they just only got smarter. Again, it's as leaders, as people who have voice, or at least these mediums and everything that we have voice. While there is this whole notion of AI replacing jobs, or you're not going to be replaced by AI, but you're going to be replaced by people who are more effective at using AI and so on. These kind of narratives are out there. But clearly, we really don't know what's going to happen. Honestly, 10 years from now, we are seeing AI, especially with cloud and everything, they're writing fascinating code. You're just going to have more and more software because software is being created for the first time by another software. You're not having a human coder doing it. So you're going to have an explosion of software. Software is going to be commoditized. The implications. It's as a technology company, we think about this. We think about this deeply. Okay, there's
Yeah.
only so much you can talk about it, but
No, and
that's the
it's a great
reality.
thing to do. So somebody's out there is listening to this and going, okay, I'm sort of piecing together. I think there's some things I should find out. And I'm not saying they have to buy your software, but how can Zoho help people understand this better?
I would basically look at, first of all, going to Zoho and then just looking up Zia. We have put out a very specific section on Zia so people can understand the approach and what are the capabilities that we have built in our software. And think of these with the lenses, like I said, the privacy lenses. That's something I would want our listeners or your listeners to kind of familiarize themselves with. What implication does AI have if I were to adopt it in my business? What are the implications? If you're looking at some tool today, I would say the first thing is understand how that company is going to use your information and make sure that you're comfortable with that, right? And I think that awareness is the first thing. And then we have a lot of information on privacy, on our stand on privacy and why privacy is important in the context of AI. All of this is pretty well documented, well structured, and all of this is available on Zoho's Zia pages.
Fantastic. Sir, it has been a pleasure to talk to you. We keep meaning to get together. We don't, but we will. I promise. We're going to do this. But at least we get to have coffee over the internet.
True that. Thank you so much, Jim, for having me on the show again. Again, always a pleasure. Again, it just goes beyond release. Talking to you, in my opinion, is a freewheeling conversation. Yes, there is some agenda around the release itself, but then we get to talk about so many more interesting things beyond the release, the implication, what does it mean for Canada. I think these are very important conversations to be had. So thank you for affording us the time, because it's not often that it goes beyond the agenda, but talking to
Yeah.
you is always a pleasure, Jim.
Fabulous stuff. My guest has been Chandrashekar LSP. He is the Canadian voice of Zoho, and you can check it out at zoho.com. You can and look for Zia. I still think it should be part of the Marvel universe, but it actually has a practical explanation of what the name is. If you're listening to this on the weekend, you probably having your coffee or whatever you listen to long podcasts, and you could have been doing something else, but you took the time to listen to us. We thank you for that, and I'll talk to you again on Monday with the tech news. See you then.